I'm Max Evans from ClimateAI, and today we're going to talk about building climate resilience. Um, so ClimateAI, we're trying to global proof to build a resilient global economy. In that way that we want to ensure lives and livelihoods are preserved. This isn't a solitary endeavor, but rather one that requires policy, mitigation, and adaptation. ClimateAI focuses on this latter, adaptation side of things. This means that we want to understand what are the present risks of climate change and what are the future risks of climate change, and how we can adapt to them and build resilience around those. We started with agriculture as a beachhead market, in large part due to personal stories. But we're now growing into energy, into finance, and into multiple other industries. So first, I'll just start with my own climate story. My mom was an indigenous Ecuadorian woman who wanted to work in agriculture. 5 of her siblings passed away during childhood, but she actually managed to thrive, and through a Catholic scholarship went to Germany to become a soil chemist before going back to Ecuador. My dad, on the other hand, started working at 14, cleaning ships to make sure that his siblings didn't go to foster care, eventually joined the army, and always dreamed of starting a farm. So I grew up in a pineapple farm in Ecuador. My dad, through some chemical innovations, managed to produce pineapples year-round. And 2009, I moved to Harvard and became a data scientist, learned applied math, and eventually made my way to Stanford, where I met Himanshu and we started ClimateAI. We built a platform that could enable people to make climate-aware, climate-focused decisions in their businesses. So the effects of climate change are multiplied when you have pandemics, when you have wars, when you have recessions, as we can see in the 2003 European heat wave, or in the 2021 US heat dome. But one of the biggest events actually happened recently in 2022 with the Russian-Ukraine war. What happened was about 30%, a third of the cereal production was in this region. A little over 40% of the calories of the world were under threat. From the 200 million people in acute risk of food insecurity pre-COVID, there was 350 million with food insecurity post-COVID. So the ClimateAI solution focused with one of the largest seed producers, Advanta, in Australia, where they were looking to sell wheat seeds in particular. So we forecasted earlier rains and an earlier start to the spring. It allowed them to select a longer season seed with a particularly high production that could be planted much earlier than normal, and it allowed them to increase 10% their sales and more than 10% production in the Australian market. We were very happy that we were able to have a positive impact in a year where it was particularly important for food to be there. As we look ahead to the 2050s using the shared socioeconomic pathways, we can see that there will be decreasing yields in a lot of cereal crops all around the world. And humans are able to adapt. So there are many AI solutions that can be used, from seasonal models to know what to plant, what to harvest when, to different breeding programs and seed selections that can then be resilient to this sort of high heat, stress, or drought, low precipitation conditions. Different optimization tools and climate analogs that can be built. So while there is a challenge, we do have the capacity and the possibility to adapt. So now let's go a little bit deeper into what we do and how we do it. Building an end-to-end weather-to-climate tool is a big challenge because climate and weather isn't a monolith. It's actually a collection of a lot of different phenomenons. On the weather side, you care about the initial conditions of the world and then moving those forward through differential equations to know what's happening for the next 10 days When you go into the subseasonal realm, when you're forecasting weeks ahead, you start to care about the upper atmospheres and the ocean currents and start looking at your maiden-Julian oscillations or similar phenomenons that drive weather at these timescales. Moving further out, months ahead, you're looking at a seasonal forecast. You can think El Nino, or you can think a North Atlantic oscillation. And it's the ocean where the memory lies of these events. And looking even further out, decades out, you start going into climate modeling, where isn't really a forecast, but more a study of where the global climate is and what are the boundary conditions of where it might or might not get to. So what this means is that we have to build a complicated AI stack that isn't really one big neural network, but rather a whole set of neural networks working together to, in the end, bring all of this data to a business and create business value. So starting at the bottom with a general deep climate neural network, we've started working with convolutional neural networks and recurrent neural networks to build what's generally used in video forecasting systems. Similar to self-driving cars, we trained on simulated data, thousands of years of simulated climate data to pre-train a model that can then be post-trained or transfer learned into the 60 to 80 years of satellite and high resolution historical data that we do have. And this allowed us to get some very good results and publish a paper. Lately, this is getting innovated. Now vision transformers are possible, both on the recurrent side as well as on the convolutional side. There's been some big innovations lately that we're excited to apply. On the localization side of things, we've worked with deep generative models. And what happens is that for businesses to make decisions, they need to have a higher spatial and a higher temporal resolution that what it can be available out of the box. And this generally needs to then, in this case of this paper, a precipitation forecast, you need to increase the temporal and spatial resolution. And generative models tend to do very well. We built, in this case, a corrector GAN that we called it, on how to build and improve the localization. Finally, we built an ensembler neural network, and this allowed us to really throw big data into our problem. This means, how do we connect separate data streams? How do we connect public and private data streams, statistical and dynamical models together so that they can work best in what one model's strong at and another model might be particularly weak at, and work together to improve the skill and provide the best predictive value to our customers. So those are the three neural network sides of things. There's one more statistical layer that's still included, which is the impact functions. This is probably the most important layer, as it is what connects all these data and all of these models to a business. And without it, it's not useful. So going into it, there's multiple ways to connect it. In agriculture, it's through yield models that map the quantity being produced. It can be through quality models to map both the quantity and the quality of goods. We also have financial models to map both to the bottom line or to different financial metrics in different industries. And this is a fundamental part of how the data ends up getting used. Another element of the UX side of things is, how do we make the data easy to use, improve the data UX? In this case, we're thinking about what questions can people ask the data and what answers can they get? I think ChatGPT had a huge innovation in data science UX on being able to QA data. In this case, the question that we're asking is a heat wave, a 1 in a 25-year event. When will it become a 1 in a 10-year event? Or when will it become a 5 in a 10-year event? And the data can actually tell you a particular number and give you a year or a period of years over which this will likely become true. So it becomes a very good way for humans to interact with complex data. Another question that our customers like to ask is for this particular zone where I produce my premium grapes, for example, could you find me another area in the world? Could you search the world for an analog, a similar climate ecosystem that I can use? So we can run this search both in space and in time, moving forward 20, 30 years, so that you can have a production strategy that is climate proof or future proof around changing ecosystems. So finally, let's move to some case studies. And I think in this particular case study, we're moving away from agriculture into our newer work. Last year, we focused on hurricane forecasts. We predicted that the most likely state to be impacted was Florida. Probabilistic forecast, it was correct in this case. And what it helps is to build the supply chains of builders and manufacturers of goods and services. Think roofing tiles or different materials that are needed, wood slates, so that they can have the right type of material following the right state's regulation ready, so that communities can rapidly rebuild when an extreme event happens, such as the hurricane landfall or south of Tampa last year. And there is both a big humanitarian as well as an economic reasoning behind using this climate intelligence. And one other case study is about wildfires in California. So here we're trying to increase the temporal skill, being able to identify in what months and what weeks of the year a wildfire is likely to occur. What tends to happen is right after a big bloom of vegetation, if there's a drought that follows it, you both have the fuel available as well as the conditions to set that fuel on fire, which makes it much more likely, as well as geographic locations where wildfires are likely to happen, both of interest to municipalities who fight the fires, as well as for your utility services. So that is it. I do want everyone to be able to go for lunch. So this is a little bit of what we do in ClimateAI, and I'd be very happy to follow up and answer any questions and catch up at any time. I think this quick snapshot gets you all excited about the potential of AI for fighting climate change. Thank you.